In a second-hand set of dimensions, on an astral plane that was never meant to fly, through wavering star mists, see the Great Atuin. Drifting onwards through space, atop the shell of the world's turtle, are 4 giant elephants, upon whose broad shoulders rests the Discworld. Welcome to Dining Table Discworld. We're reading through the Discworld novels and discussing them at our dining table. Be aware there will be spoilers for the current book and others in the series.
Hello, welcome to Dining Table Discworld. I'm Dave.
I'm Kathy.
And today we are talking about Guards, which is the 8th book in the Discworld series, and it was published in 1989. So, Kathy, do you have a synopsis?
Indeed I do. In Ankh-Morpork, the City Watch is a joke led by a drunk, who mostly keep themselves out of trouble. Then Carrot, the tallest dwarf on the disc, arrives and shakes things up with his idealistic naivete and powerful muscles. Meanwhile, a secret society of inadequate men plans to restore the ancestral king, or a king, anyway, by calling up a legendary dragon to terrorise the city. Captain Vimes, who has allowed his investigative skills to be drowned in drink, looks into it with the help of aristocratic dragon enthusiast Lady Sybil. The situation steadily unravels for everyone, except perhaps the patrician in the palace dungeons, as the dragon's power increases. Can a few idiots, an orangutan, the city's wealthiest spinster, and a reptile with a stomach full of rocket fuel save the city? It's a 1 in a million chance, but it just might work.
So, we are talking about what I would describe as one of the third of the triumvirate of Discworld starting points.
Okay.
Well, Mort,
Weird
Sisters, Guards.
Yes.
Those would be the triumvirate of...
I suppose the early, okay.
Going postal later, right, but I think these are the...
The city's quite established at that point.
Yeah, these are the 3 pillars.
There's Rincewind, we've had 3 of those already, and that is a sub-series?
Yeah, I suppose that's... Rincewind is the sub-series, but I kind of...
And we've had 3 so far.
Yeah, I don't feel like any of those... I mean, they're very Rincewind books, but I don't think any of those are really a solid starting, If I'm going to give someone a book, one of the Discworld books is going to be Guards, it's going to be Weird Sisters. It may be Mort, it may be Reaper Man, but,
I'd probably still go with Mort. Again, I've not read Reaper Man in a long time.
Yeah, we can have this discussion in a few books' time.
Yes. Also, at some point we need to decide which Rincewind book people can start with, but I guess we need to read more of those. Yeah,
but I've got to say, we talked about this before. Wouldn't give anyone the first 2. Sorcery.
It's alright.
It's alright. So at this point, what do you give them as a?
I feel like maybe you want to get in something that's a bit more in the kind of core wizard cast, but then those feel later and it's not really a starting point.
I mean, we get Eric. Eric is our spoilers. Eric's next.
Oh, well, I guess we'll see how Eric.
So we'll see how Eric goes.
Sure,
but I mean,
don't remember that very well.
I mean, obviously the downside of that one is it starts resolving the cliffhanger from Sorcery, so that might be. But anyway, that's next That's next podcast. We are getting ahead of ourselves. But anyway, Guards. So, I'll keep waffling since I started. I will start with the hot take. Go for hot takes. I don't like Vimes at the start of this book.
Yeah, Well, the very first intro, I'm a bit like, all right. Well, in all honesty, I was a bit like, okay, boomer.
I suppose we should really, before we go too far, our initial thoughts.
Oh yeah, do you want me to cut that out and put that in again? Or?
Oh no, we're professional podcasters. This is supposed to be how it is.
I don't think we're professional. No one's paid us anything.
Good point. So my first thoughts, one of the pillars of the triumvirate of Discworld, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Might have been also helped by the fact that this was the plot of one of the Discworld computer games, which was a great computer game.
Oh, so I never played this.
So I loved it. And dragons, always good. Many other things introduced this book that was this. So really really enjoyed it. Good work. Right, what was your initial thoughts?
So I read Men at Arms first, and I may have also read Feet of Clay after that, or I definitely... Guards was not the first Watch book I read. So for me, when I did read it, it felt like a bit of a step back. The main thing I think you needed to know from this one that gets mentioned in Men at Arms is that Vimes was an alcoholic, and that Carrot arrived and was so naive he arrested the head of the Thieves Guild for thieving.
Yes.
And that's kind of it, really. So I read it and I was like, oh, everyone's further back than where they were. And reading it again, I think Vimes's drunkenness, I expect it to be more of a thing. Obviously, his sobriety is quite a thing later on, which is fair enough, because obviously getting over alcoholism can be very difficult for people. And, it's a big thing later on. But it didn't seem to be as much of a thing in this book.
No.
Like, he clearly is drunk at the beginning, and he's in a bad way. But it's not clear how long that's been going on for, and he does seem to... Well, it doesn't really show him making a decision about it, but it becomes less of a focus. I feel like at the beginning, you said about not liking Vimes initially. Yeah. At the beginning, it's sort of that archetype of detective, like, he's down on his luck, he's got a drinking problem, he was brung low by a woman, to quote Sergeant Colon, but we never hear anything about that, so it feels a little bit irrelevant, if I'm honest. I think the thing we didn't like, or that I didn't like, and I imagine it's similar for you, in the first bit, is Vimes is lying drunk in the gutter, and he's comparing the city to a woman, but he's doing that thing where no one mentioned women, and suddenly somebody is saying, oh, women, which may be where the boomer thing came from as well, which is not that younger gents don't do that. I think I've heard it more from boomers. And you're a bit like, no one said anything. This was about something else. Why are women being brought into it now? My slightly instinctive reaction is like, should I say something at this point? Or just sit here quietly and hope they don't notice?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think,
After that, it's fine, because when I read that first bit, I was like, oh, really?
Yeah.
But then he does get better much quicker, so... Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think Vimes at the start of the book. We're just going to go straight onto the characters and talk about Vimes, and it turns out...
Sure.
I mean, let's be honest, he is one of the significant characters in the book, so,
Yeah, so Vimes... largely, and then introducing the others. So yeah, I think if we start with Vimes, see how we go. And it's more, I know mysteries tend to be plot focused, so I think character,
So he is someone that, his drinking problem is so major, he is blind drunk in a gutter, unconscious at the start of the book.
It's clearly been an ongoing thing because people don't expect him to know where he is, and they expect him to be, drunk. I think in this it might be worse because obviously they just had a funeral for a watchman.
True, yes, that is that. But still... Later in the early parts of the book, again, he's found in the pub when he should be working. But you're right, it's his kind of jump to, I'm not going to call it sobriety, but certainly
he's
not
made
being drunk.
It gets very busy. He doesn't have chance to have a drink.
And when he does try and go and have a drink, it's been eaten by the dragon.
Yeah.
So
a dragon ate all of his booze.
Which
drank all of his booze. Yeah.
I digested everything alcohol related
and more.
Yeah. So you're right. He doesn't really in this book. He doesn't make a decision to be sober or to stop drinking.
I feel like having a drinking problem is kind of an archetype of the detective thing. Particularly at that time. I don't remember.
It's always been a gumshoe detective. You've got. Well,
it's also a police procedural thing because isn't there all that stuff from the 70s and 80s where you had a load of hard drinking police officers?
I mean, I can't say yes but I only know this from Ashes to Ashes and Life on Mars.
I don't know how you expect I'd know better. I'm younger than you are.
Yeah, so. I don't really have
and
much
also
to do with
that
this.
Episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine where Jake meets that old detective who he really admires until he finds out the guy is a sexist, racist, homophobic asshole.
Yeah. So it is a trope. It's a starting trope. But as he ditches the habit, so to speak, or he just has, he does become a much, much better character.
Yes. I feel like... Again, my issue when I read this the first time was it was overshadowed by having seen what the characters became later, but it's been longer since I've read a watch book, so I didn't have that as much. But yeah, Vimes is very much, he's the captain, and he's obviously a working class lad from the Shades, which is obviously the worst part of the city. I say made good, made somewhat better, but kind of in a position where no one's expecting him to do anything, and everyone's like, well, these guys are kind of rubbish.
Risen through the ranks, potentially because no one else wanted the job. Certainly the watch is And they call them it's the Night Watch.
I don't even think they say that in this book. I was expecting they keep calling they call them the City Watch, don't they?
No, they mention Night Watch in here.
They don't mention the Day Watch, though.
No, this is the thing I was going to say.
That comes up later. I was kind of half expecting, because he just mentions the Palace Guards. Oh, he hates the Palace Guards. They've got plumes in their helmet. Which then reminds me of the whole thing between the Musketeers and the Guards in Three Musketeers, which is separate.
But yeah, so, the Watch because the Thieves Guild exists as a, they've kind of streamlined the whole thievery thing. You can pay up front at the start of the year to get your robberies out and over and done with,
or you can pay to not have them. But yes. It says the point that if there's going to be organised crime, it might as well be really organised for everyone's convenience.
Yeah, and so the Watch has a bit of a strange position so far as they don't really have crime to deal with, because the Thieves Guild deal with if there's unlawful.
There clearly is crime.
Yes, but if there's unlawful thievery, the Thieves Guild deal with it.
Yeah. There clearly is stuff that's crime, but the point is they stay out of the shades, which is the crime-ridden bit. And again, the idea is that everything's either the guilds, which are official and are kind of enforcing their rules on what covers their remit, or it's sorted out by the various gangs and groups that have rose to prominence in the less good areas. And although this doesn't have the description of privilege in it, one assumes the wealthier bits are kind of dealing with their own thing. Yeah. And again, guardsmen are just people to be bossed around. Their job is
walk around, ring a bell, and
yes. I was about to say, they just stand there and say it's 12 o'clock and all is well.
Yes, just don't ring it too loudly.
And then nip inside again. Yeah, it is the idea that you've got these kind of deadbeat characters. One of them's just died. We didn't see him, but he did seem to be trying to. He
ran towards trouble. Well, he ran
too quickly towards trouble. And the others didn't keep up with him. Yeah. So it does suggest there was still some idealism, because. So the thing we get, obviously there's Sergeant Colon and Corporal Nobbs. Colon is a guy who I think was a sergeant in the military previously. Yes. Again, very working class. He's on night shift. His wife's on day shift. They barely pass in, the twilight. And they somehow managed to raise a family of 4 children and have a very happy marriage with barely kind of seeing each other. But
I'd imagine that's why it's a happy marriage.
That is implied, yeah. Colon's kind of one of these people who, I think, again, I get confused as what's this book and what's another, but he's very much sergeant. That's the level he's at. So
he does mention it does in this one. He's one of life's perpetual sergeants. He gravitates to that point, and then that's where he stays. He's quite happy, doesn't want to go anywhere else.
Because the book keeps describing him as the rank.
Yes.
So obviously for rank and file. Although with Nobby, possibly a comment on smell.
Yes.
And it's clear that Colon's always the highest level of the rank. So he's he'll give the orders, but he's not an officer, which Vimes is, though I wonder how, but things were obviously better in the past.
I imagine he was the most senior person when the last captain.
Maybe. And obviously Colon doesn't go above sergeant. So.
Yeah, but, it was like, well, do you want it? And it's like, well, it comes with an extra and then, 6pence or something like that.
And then Nobby is the Baldric of Discworld.
Yes.
He's just this strange, little creature. He's like a little guy. He's like a weird little guy, to use internet. So we now have a term for it. Nobby is the weird little guy of certainly
he's described, he's kind of gnome-like, but definitely not a gnome.
Everyone's pretty sure he's human because nothing else seems to fit, but it's just the idea that he's just this weird little guy who's obviously constantly filching and sneaking, and is just generally untrustworthy, but in a kind of low-grade, reliable, dependable way. You're not going to leave your spoons around Nobby, but he's also not going to stab you in the back.
Yeah,
that'd be a lot of effort. He'd run away.
Yeah, he would definitely kick you when you're down. But he would
kick you in a fork.
Yeah, he would make sure you definitely, he wouldn't be going.
Only if you weren't going to get up.
Yeah, and he would he would take your valuables. But again,
it's kind of this low grade, and you're like, how did this guy get here?
But again, that's very much a trope within military fiction. You've got the privates that are kind of just there for
He doesn't have any other people at that level to kind of blend in with, though.
No.
And then we come to the new recruits. I say recruits, volunteer, which confused everyone. But what did you do to be sent here?
So obviously, the Watch is considered such a low level.
It's clearly a punishment.
Yeah, and this so Iron Iron? I was trying to do his surname. And Carrot Iron Fountain comes from Lanka, from the...
Was it Lanka?
Because
they can sort of mag wrap.
Yeah. So from the mountains around Lanka.
I don't think the dwarf mines conform to above ground human kingdoms.
No, not so much.
I don't know how deep it goes when they move Lanka, but I don't think the dwarves were bothered by that. But
not covered in this though.
He comes from a dwarf mine in the Rantrops, and he's kind of being sent away from home, not for doing anything bad, because he doesn't quite fit in, kind of literally, because the thing with Carrot is that he was adopted. His parents, who were dwarves, and his father's a dwarf king, but that just kind of means, like, mine overseer. Yeah. It's like, you're just the head of the mine. He was found after a carriage accident. Is that in this book? Or
it is. No, it is mentioned in this
I can't remember how much they mentioned of this.
All they found was Carrot and the sword.
Yes, that was it. So Carrot is taken in by, this dwarf family, raised as a dwarf, and it's not till he gets older and taller that it's kind of revealed to him, well, you're not actually biologically a dwarf, you're a human, because he's over 6 foot and extremely well-muscled and basically like the hero from any given very stereotypical fantasy cover. It's that guy with the sword and the big muscles.
So, muscles coming from having worked in a mine all of his life.
That's true, yeah. And so he is sent out. Now, the idea with this is that dwarves are very literal. He calls metaphor, what is it, decorative lying?
Yes.
I think. Oh, yeah, like lying, but more decorative.
Yeah.
So, Carrot's very literal-minded. The idea seems to be that dwarves generally are, which I think, because they've not gone to dwarf society very much. But the point in Weird Sisters was that Hwel was very unusual, being like a writer. And, obviously a spinner of tales and fictions and metaphor and all of that. He was very strange for a dwarf. In this case, Carrot is very strange for a dwarf just because of being actually human, but he is raised dwarf and is culturally
And the only
dwarfish.
Dwarf thing we've seen so far being in Weird Sisters is the bar where they're all being...
They're seeing that gold. And...
Classic dwarven, warriors.
Well, they're kind of doing that on the weekend before they go back to their job at the cosmetics mill.
Yeah.
Because I think that's mentioned there.
Yes, it is,
yeah. But the point is, dwarves very much do manual work. They do practical things.
Yeah.
Carrot's family feel like he needs to be around humans, but send him to a city. They speak to a human who delivers stuff in the mountains.
I think there's also a thing between him and Minty. Sorry, yes, I was close. I think
which is interesting because I believe he refers to her as she, and that's a whole thing later, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, but I think there's obviously
he's interested in another dwarf, and that dwarf's family are a bit like, no, because they're perhaps a little more prejudiced and like he's not a dwarf.
Yes,
he's like, well, he's been raised a dwarf his whole life. So Carrot gets told he's human. He gets kind of sent away from home, not as a punishment, but as it's difficult for you to be here. Go with your own people. He is told stories of the Watch by the old man that delivers or does deliveries and stuff for the dwarves above ground, and who sort of gives him a ride. And because his grandfather was in the City Watch, so Carrots get stories from like 100 years ago, when obviously the Watch was a big organisation and it's all very exciting. And again, if you're telling your grandkids stories, you're going to make yourself sound very heroic, like you're chasing thieves and murderers over rooftops.
Yeah.
There are rooftops in this.
There are rooftops,
in fairness.
Yeah, yes. They definitely rooftops.
But yes, Carrot, being very literal, he's given this old watch book, like the law code, and he's like memorising it. And so Carrot turns up, everyone's like, why are you here? He's shiny, he's new, he wants to help out. A lot of his story is told through letters home to his parents, so he doesn't understand things like he's staying in this house with a lady and all her many daughters who receive many visitors at all hours. And they're surprised he wants to rent for the whole night, but after a while they're a bit like, oh, well, it's nice to have you around, I guess. Sometimes the visitors aren't very nice. And he's like, she must need many dowries for these many daughters. And it's like, yes, Carrot, all right, yeah. It's that whole, like, very naive guy has not realised it's a brothel. So, yeah, you get kind of that, naive fish out of water character describe stuff.
And obviously, because he knows the law, because he has the book. As soon as he hears about the Thieves Guild, he goes and arrests the head of the Thieves Guild.
Which causes a bit of a ruckus.
Yeah.
But yeah, so stuff like that. And yeah, again, he's very literal-minded. Sometimes people will say things and they'll take it literally, and which, I mean, is a thing that happens sometimes to people anyway. Yeah. Yes, those are kind of like the main Watch characters. And then, I mean, the book actually starts with the baddies.
Yes, we do. We do.
Which is
dragon. And if you've played the Discworld game, then you know what I'm doing there.
I was, slightly confused by that.
Yeah, it's how they summon the dragon in the game. Is they just standing around attracting dragon.
Okay. So, yes. So the Elucidated Brethren of the Ebon Knight, which is one of what turns out to be various secret societies in Ankh-Morpork. This one is about 5 or 6 guys who are these sort of... Well, they're led by a guy called the Supreme Grand Leader. Grand Supreme Leader?
He's Grand Supreme Leader, yeah. So.
Who, is basically using these, useful idiots. So, and the whole point is he's looking for these inadequate, angry, petty little guys. So, this is the Grandmaster thinking to himself. It's like, give him the ones in which floods of venom and vindictiveness were dammed up behind thin walls of ineptitude and low-grade paranoia. And they're also described as having mean-minded resentfulness. And the point is he plays on their feeling of the people have things better than me, why not me? Things aren't right. And to just, get them involved in this whole thing.
I'm sure we all know people like that.
It is actually terrifying to me that this is written as a book where it's a bit like, but this is a secret society. And now it's just everywhere and in the papers, and people in charge of, countries are just, ginning up this stuff, so that's a little terrifying.
It is. Thankfully, none of them can summon dragons. We hope.
I feel like they don't need to. We have other things, but yeah.
Anyway. So we have brother Gatekeeper. Doorkeeper, brother
Watchtower.
Fingers.
Yes, brother Fingers, brother Plasterer.
Yes.
There's the one that reminds me of Nobby a bit, whose name I can't remember now. But he's like the weird little guy of this group of small-minded men.
Yeah. Yes. So and there's lots of just random,
It's kind of comical stuff where they're all kind of getting on each other's.
Well, it's also lots of random secret society stuff,
and they're all kind of getting on each other's nerves a bit, but they're all kind of trying to impress the Grand Supreme Leader, who's kind of using them because
Brother Dunnykin.
That's it. I know I recognise it when I heard it. So early on in the book that we keep seeing them, basically what they're doing is the whole idea is kind of we need a king because we don't like the traditional current government, and if there was a dragon, the king would turn up to slay it. Let's get a dragon.
Using kind of story logic to
well, it's Discworld, so story logic works more. Basically, dragon starts terrorising Ankh-Morpork, but first it's kind of a little short enough bursts, and only a few people are roasted, that the Watch realise about it, although not for any detection, just because they happened to be there when the dragon turned up and blasted people.
They were drunk.
Yeah. And then the patrician tries to cover it up initially, but then after a bit it's like, no, there's a dragon.
It's a wading bird.
Yes.
A wading bird.
And Vimes is initially told, well, just to kind of ignore it and cover it up, which he normally would do, but it seems to kind of get under his skin a bit. So that's when he goes to the fancy part of the city, which is Ankh, isn't it? Because he wants to find out more about dragons. And he meets Lady Sybil Ramkin, who is a very aristocratic, posh lady, who's also very into breeding dragons, but these are swamp dragons, which are, again, the weird little guys of the reptile world, in that they're these creatures that are kind of full of all these, flammable gases and quite often explode. But she's really into it, and it's kind of like the horsey person type thing, but with little dragons.
I thought so. We might want to mention is that in the Discworld, dragons aren't in Colour of Magic. We talked about dragons there because of the dragon riders.
Oh yeah.
But again, in Discworld, the classic fire breathing Western are legends. They have gone somewhere else. So you don't actually have dragons around. So the ones in the Wormberg were being summoned by force of will.
Well, their imagination.
Imagination and force of will.
Imagine dragons.
In a location that's very magical.
Yeah.
And the ones that the Brotherhood are summoning, they've managed to get hold of a book of dragon summoning.
And they summon them from a space that's where the dragons went.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
So this is why. This is why it's such a big thing. It's like suddenly an actual dragon compared to
the weird little
sort of swamp dragons.
Yes. Lady Sybil's one of these people who's very, very nice to everyone, and she's also incredibly posh. but very, very nice and down to earth, despite being incredibly posh. And her whole estate's kind of a bit mouldering, but she's really focused on the dragons. So I don't know if everyone knows somebody like this, but there are people like this around, certainly. Yeah, she's just very single-minded in her focus. Yeah, so Vimes sort of ends up talking to her, and then he gets burned, and which obviously happens to her, and she knows how to treat that. So he sort of ends up like in her house, like because he just turned up as a watchman, and she just has this constant thing about, oh, he's like a gallant watchman. He's sort of almost a bit like, am I? Oh, okay, and trying to live up to that. And again, it's one of Pratchett's very sort of subtle romances.
Yes,
but it was nice. But again, that they're both people of a certain age. They've both gone through life on their own, like romantically, as far as you can tell. We never hear what Vimes' background was, besides vague mutterings of colon. Yeah, it's that Lady Sybil's really nice and practical, and also she wants to get to the bottom of things. And Vimes, despite ignoring tons of stuff, really wants to get to the bottom of this as well. So yeah, their interests kind of align. And yeah, so that's quite nice, which I think is why Vimes, like, he gets likeable really quickly, because you sort of see him in this mode.
Yes, he becomes a bit more, what is it, humanised? Not humanised, but yes, just a bit more of a...
Like sympathetic?
Yeah, there we go, thank you very much. Yeah.
Also, Vimes meets Sybil's... Well, she's bred many a dragon from all sorts of lineages with fancied names, which is why it makes you think of horses, although almost any animal you breed bred by posh people will have that sort of thing. But one of them, who ends up being called Errol, is like a weird one. He's a bit of a run to the lister, and he doesn't seem quite... Normally has these massive nostrils, and we actually have a picture of him that I colled in some years ago in our hallway, which I guess we could put on.
Yes, we will.
on something. And she ends up giving Vimes Errol kind of as a pet, and then he becomes like the watch mascot.
Yes.
In the meantime, the dragons go around burning bits of the city. Everyone's like, what's the patrician doing? They throw him in the dungeon because he's not dealing with it. Some monster hunters show up. They're not that interested because the pay isn't very good. There's randomly a Beowulf reference.
Well, because the pay for traditional dragon slaying is half the kingdom and the hand of
hand of the princess.
And there's not a princess. So.
No, the patrician has an aunt over in, was it Quirm or Stolat or something? Yeah. But she wasn't interested.
No.
I did quite like, there's one bit, I just realised, when Lady Sybil mentions, it's when Vimes loses his job for a bit, and Lady Sybil's like, oh, she saw that the couple over in Stohelic could use
yes.
They're a nice young couple, I'm sure they could use a guardsman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, she knows more than Isabel. Because posh people like know each other.
Yeah, so
Lady Sybil's... I really like Lady Sybil.
Yeah.
There's this whole thing. So in Weird Sisters, we had the Duchess, who was this, like, horrifying woman, and she's described as very big. And it's kind of more a description than, like, a criticism. Lady Sybil is also clearly a big woman. She's tall, she's statuesque, however you want to call it. She's very forceful of personality.
Here we go.
And a lot of that is kindness.
Sybil is a towering big lady with a mass of chestnut hair. The Ramekins have never bred for beauty, they're bred for nobility, a healthy solidity and big bones, and Lady Sybil is a shining result.
Yes, so she's probably years of aristocratic.
I thought I've got to say the picture. Well, I'm currently referencing the Ultimate Discworld Companion.
Okay. I mean, the hair's kind of, at least at this point, is a wig. Yes. Like, she has a few different wigs, because again, she breeds very flammable and explodey dragons, so her hair's a bit singed off, so she does tend to wear a wig. But yes, Sybil's amazing, because at one point she's basically face to face with this dragon, and having dealt with little dragons the whole time, this one, which is, how big is it? It's like as big as a square or something.
Huge.
It's like a plaza.
Yeah, it's not.
She stands in front of this thing, and its head is as big as a horse. And she just does what she does with the little guys she has around all the time, and is like almost like tapping it on the nose with a newspaper and saying, no, bad, And I just have this picture of her, because at that point she's wearing is she wearing a nightie, or like she's wearing a fancy ball gown or something? And then this dragon is just in front of her in like this square, like right in front of her face, and Vimes has to pull her away.
That's at the coronation, when the dragon turns up at the coronation.
Yes, because so what happens is a king, who is never named and is just some lad from a different city, who somehow is also related to the Supreme Grand Master.
Yes.
Shows up, slays the dragon, and this is what gets Vimes going, because the slayed dragon, it didn't explode, there weren't chunks of it everywhere, it just disappeared. I don't think there's even Ash, like a vampire in Buffy.
No.
But, and everyone's like, oh, this guy's the king. And this gets into one of the bits of the book about class, because suddenly everyone's like, oh, kings, we're going to have a coronation, we're going to have a king. And a lot of the Watchmen are like, I'm sorry, what? See, they haven't given Vimes this family history yet.
Not
I think
yet, no.
So Terry fills it in later, but Vimes and also Colon who are very much kind of like, these working class guys are very much like, what? We don't need that. But yeah, 100 years, they haven't had kings. They've had various patricians. They may have had some of the governments along the way. Who knows? It's Ankh-Morpork. You could see it. And so everyone's like, oh, the king. And they don't, this guy's name is never mentioned. Everyone's like, we've got Bunting. There's Bunting everywhere.
There's Bunting.
Which, considering we had both the death of a monarch and then a coronation here, I was a bit like, oh, God. Because the Bunting was everywhere. And all the children got given like a soft toy and a book. No, because we had the Jubilee,
yes,
and then the death of the monarch, and then the coronation. So It's just been years of Bunting over here. Bunting. I think they're trying to distract us from a lot of stuff with Bunting.
Yeah, Bunting, that's not working.
So I feel like that struck a bit more now than it did back when I read it, when we hadn't had.
Yeah,
such.
I mean the point is the king is such a non-character.
Non-entity.
He's not even given a name. He's not.
It's just the king.
And to be honest, we never actually see him.
No, it's just people just describe what he did.
Yeah. So because we our point of view is that never even at the coronation, the point of view we're reading is so far away.
Yeah. Can't really see what happens.
Yeah, we don't really.
Yeah, it's interesting because like Colon's there saying he doesn't like it, but his wife's really into it. So he's a bit like, oh, okay. And Vimes is just very much against it. Like, why? This isn't one of the ones where these books tend to have a whole rant about kings at various points. But yeah, it's just the idea that a king will turn up and everything will be great. And it's like, well, that's
not how it works.
Not really how leaders work.
No,
but it's fine because then the guy gets eaten by a dragon.
Yes, and then the dragon becomes king
because that's how monarchy works.
You eat the previous one.
Oh dear.
Gone to a dark place, I'm sorry.
I think what happens is they put the patrician in the dungeon. The guy they said was going to be king
has been eaten
by the dragon.
Do you argue with the dragon if it wants to be king?
Well, this is the thing. The dragon's in charge now. And it's like, oh, okay. So before that, part of what happens with that is, so the elucidated Brevlin were summoning the dragon, and the Supreme Grand Master said they could control it. But then it turned out the dragon figured out how to get into the real world on its own, and then it was quite angry.
Yeah,
so
it didn't like being controlled.
Yeah, so what happens is actually at one of their meetings, the dragon comes out, so Brother Fingers has gone off to get some pizza, and the dragon returns, and it's angry, and he comes back, and has anyone seen that gif from the episode Community where Troy comes back with the pizzas and everything's on fire? It's like that, except that everyone would be a pile of ash, so a little bit darker.
Yes, but when I read that, it was like, oh, I recognise this GIF. And it's Brother Fingers with a pile of pizzas and just this trashed meeting hall, which it kind of viewed as a village community centre, is kind of viewed kind of those kind of like community. I kind of thought it was
like the back room of somewhere.
Yeah, but still, but basically just on fire.
Yes. So only Brother Fingers and the Supreme Grand Master.
Yes, survive.
Yes. The thing is, the Supreme Grand Master is in it from the beginning, and we get his viewpoint, but we don't quite know who he is. So that's kind of one of the mysteries. It's interesting because the whole thing with Vimes is that he's investigative in later books. In this one, it almost seems a bit like he's just gotten a bit curious. And each time he seems like he's on the trail of something happens. Like, he's like, I don't think the dragon's dead. And everyone's like, what? We saw it disappear. He's like, yeah, but it just disappeared. But then it reappears. So he's like, he doesn't have time to investigate that. Yeah. So the main mystery is kind of like, who's this guy that's set the dragon up and done all this? Kind of deposed the patrician. The dragon has knocked a load of the walls down in the palace and is basically kind of hanging there upside down like a bat, while a load of gold is made into a big hoard.
Small amount to start with.
I think it's still a reasonable amount.
Mostly gold-plated.
Yeah, but the other thing the dragon wants, because it's hungry, and the problem is, so the guy who was the patrician secretary, a very efficient guy who Vimes knew from childhood, but he's got to the, role of being secretary for the patrician, is sort of trying to carry on like it's normal, and he's inviting everyone to say, oh, we're having a meeting now, and then the dragon's now called the king, and it's and the king's kind of talking to him, and all the guild leaders and civic people are turning up, going a bit like, He's like, about what the dragon eats. Everyone's like, why have we come here for dinner? Why are they giving us so much food? But basically, it's the idea that a dragon will feast on virgins.
Yes.
Yeah, and everyone's a bit like, oh.
What noble.
Yeah, it basically needs to eat someone, like, was it like a couple times a year or something?
Once a month.
That was it, yeah. And it's this thing, and I've seen it in, that Torchwood Children of Earth thing does it as well. This idea of, like, these people who are these civic leaders and think themselves very reasonable and sensible, serious men, are suddenly confronted by this massive power going, we just need you to sacrifice people. And the first like, oh no, this is abhorrent. And then it's a bit like, there really is nothing you can do. And it's like, okay, well, I guess we'll like talk this round. So then what happens is the Watch have to go out and announce this. And it's interesting because Colon is initially a bit like, and he's a bit like, oh, the dragon won't do it really. And Nobby's like, I don't know what's there to stop it. Which is so relevant now. So these people in charge, they won't, it wouldn't do that. And Nobby says, I don't see what's to prevent it, do you? And this is the thing. Now, people are like, oh, well, the people in power aren't really going to take away all our rights and make life terrible for, like, thousands and millions of people. And it's like, what's stopping them? They'll do it if they can.
If it benefits them, yeah. Or if it's what they want. If it fits with them. If it fits with their ideals.
Oh, no. It can also be if it makes them a load of money, Dave. Like, what?
That's their ideals. The ideal is a lot of money.
Anyway, so yeah. So at first, Colon's, announces in the street, and he's like, oh, I'm just a messenger, and everyone's getting really angry, and then Colon's getting into it, and he has this great phrase, which is, the people united can never be ignited. Which is lovely, because Colon's kind of being a rabble-rouser, but as people are talking, and the people themselves, and this is a thing, it's so much about, like, dictatorship and power, and it feels far too relevant now. These books keep doing this.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
And at first people are like, oh, no, we won't stand for it. Oh, and then something's a bit like, but what's the alternative? Are we just all going to get burned? And everyone's like, oh. And then people sort of like talk themselves around to it. And someone's like, oh, you don't want your daughter, And someone's a bit like, yeah, but what about... And then suddenly the people... And Colon's still trying to go, the people united. And at first people were really keen. But then, does the dragon show up at that point? It just flies over or something. Everyone's a bit like, we don't know this guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just the show of power, and people are kind of pre-doing what the dragon wants. It's kind of like pre-censoring, or like something doesn't even have to be a law yet or enacted, but people say, oh, well, this is coming, so we'll, people are very flexible and adjustable, which is kind of good, but also bad. Yeah. So yes, I just quite like that sort of whole phrase that Colon comes up with and then quickly abandons. And then I guess the main other character that we haven't gone into is Vetinari.
No?
Oh, of course, the librarian, yes. Okay.
Okay.
I wasn't sure what order you're doing. Okay, I'll do the librarian.
More important one, the most important character out of the entire book. If you work in library services. Okay,
that's true.
So we see a lot more of the librarian in this book, which I'm always a fan of the librarian. Anything that is more librarian inclusive is
yes, yeah.
And we get to see so the librarian, because obviously the Book of Dragon Summoning has been stolen from the library in the Unseen University.
Because Brother Fingers used to work there.
And he is not happy about it.
Yeah, so he goes to the Watch.
Just goes to the Watch, which, and try and gets them to try and help. But unfortunately, the Watch does not fully understand the severity of this situation, because someone has stolen a book.
They're trying to deal with the dragon burning people. And
someone's stolen a book.
Yes. What I quite like about this is it's clear that the librarian's communicating in charades, but rather than in any way describing what he's doing, after the initial premise of, oh, he's communicating in charades, the whole thing of what he's saying is just people going, okay, first word, small word, oh, it's this. So you never see the librarian actually doing anything on the page. You never hear him he makes noises, but he does some ooks and occasional eeks. But mostly it's just people guessing stuff. And it's really smart how Pratchett has done this thing where, like you can almost see what the librarian's doing by what they're guessing. It's like big, what,
Yes,
large.
That's very...
so that's just like really clever conceit.
He's deputized into the Watch. He has his own badge.
Yes.
And we get to see the first instance of I think the most major usage of L space.
Yes.
The fact that that all libraries and significant collections of books are connected through space-time.
I have marked it with an appropriate kind of bookmark in the Ultimate Companion. So the equation is knowledge equals power equals energy equals matter equals mass. A good bookshop is just a genteel black hole that knows how to read. Libraries everywhere are connected in L space by the book wormholes, created by the strong space-time distortions found in any large collection of books.
I don't disagree with this. I mean, it's a great idea. I have yet to manage to amass enough books to create my own. Working on it.
When you say I have yet to, you literally work in a load of libraries, so...
Yeah, but we kind of...
I mean, the library at my workplace has a lot of books. Like, they want to describe how many miles of shelves they have.
I know. We simply can't... Even the library of Birmingham, we haven't quite amassed quite enough there yet.
Yes, so this is the first, instance of an usage of L space, and so it's interdimensional as well.
Well, it's a temporal... So it's four dimensions. So the librarian goes back in time to watch Brother Fingers stealing the book, and to read the book before it gets stolen. So he can,
but he has to avoid his past self because he's not allowed to mess. Like he isn't supposed to be doing that, but clearly he knows how to.
Yes, there's quote about the library. The chief librarian.
Librarians of space-time or something.
Yeah, it's getting very annoyed with that sort of thing.
Yeah. Sorry, just imagine now thinking about, I'm just going to discard this book where the librarian is not looking. And various other things one might do, and it's like, librarian hasn't said I can do this, I'm just going to kind of do it. The watch sort of become more interested when he points out that he explains that the title of the book is The Summoning of Dragons.
Yes.
And it's like, suddenly it is relevant to their inquiries.
Yes. I don't know why it wasn't relevant to start with. Someone had stolen a book.
They were just so distracted by the dragon and maybe the king.
I mean, to be fair, I'm not entirely sure that the Unseen University Library is a bit strange. I mean, obviously, it's magical, but they've got to have some sort of lending criteria there. It's just Brother Fingers didn't obey it.
Well, Brother Fingers didn't work at the university anymore. That's the point. He had worked there, and I think he wasn't working there anymore.
Again, we don't know what the lending criteria is. You might be able to get a guest ticket, borrowing a certain number of books.
He's not a wizard. I feel like it's for wizards. Because I feel like even the wizards are warned about going in there.
I know. It's...
and I get the impression he was like estates or some sort of staff like that.
Staff, yeah. A librarian, yay. That's fine.
Should we do the patrician now?
We should mention the patrician.
I feel like last time we saw the patrician anything, he was there very briefly, and then he was turned into a lizard, and then he was under the care of the librarian for a while. We don't see Waffles. I hope Waffles is alright this whole time.
I think something he's mentioned about that.
Is he? I felt like he wasn't mentioned.
Hang on, we're referencing, I don't, because yes, I mean, Waffles was an old dog to start with, but, I'm hoping...
Well, we know he's around later, but I just don't think he's mentioned in this book, although he was obviously in Sorcery.
Yes.
So the Patrician of Ankh-Morpork is currently Lord Vetinari, who is this terrifying Machiavellian figure, but in a very sort of civic-minded way. It's not about power or money for him. I think he already has access to those, but he's kind of shapes the city in such a way, and it seems like the City Watch aren't really important. Like, he's the one who says that they're idiots led by a drunk or something like that. He's very derogatory toward them at one point. But yes, it shows him kind of planning things and kind of like running meetings a bit, and then obviously he gets deposed and he's in the dungeon. And then when Vimes starts looking into things too much and upsetting the Dragon King, Vimes is thrown in the dungeon as well. Yeah. And then what is one of the more terrifying things in this book full of people being roasted alive is that Vetinari is in the dungeon. He has trained the rats to... To
be fair, they didn't need a lot of training, given that they were...
All rats are very trainable. Anyway, but these rats probably have ancestry linking back to the Unseen University and probably been affected by magic, so they are, like, particularly intelligent rats. But he's trained them to find things and bring stuff in, so he's in quite a lot of comfort. They're bringing him books to read. They're not very good at reading the books themselves. It's not always what he wants. Sometimes I ask them for beer, but he's having to describe things how it looks, but he's, like, offering stuff to Vimes. And Vimes is there trying to scrape and scratch and, like, escape, and then the librarian helps him do that. And Veterinary's like, oh, okay, because he gets Vimes to look at the door, because it's one of the most secure cellars in the palace, and Vimes is looking at the door, yeah, there's bolts and all sorts of stuff, and it's not till later, it's like, usually in a dungeon, the bolts are on the outside. And Vimes is like, what if somebody comes in? And Veterinary's like, well, no, they won't. And the whole point is you wouldn't build a dungeon that you yourself don't want to be thrown into if you're that kind of ruler. But it's interesting because at one point, Vetinari is sort of talking to Vimes about how he views the city and how he views human nature. And I think a lot of it's going over Vimes' head, and Vimes is still treating him as the boss a bit, to an extent, and also a bit like, this is not the time for this. But it's interesting. Vetinari's view is a little bleak and pessimistic, but I think it has... It kind of seems resigned about how humans are. So there's stuff, he says there's a sort of mass-produced darkness of the soul. It's like, people accept evil not because they say yes, but because they don't say no. Because the bad people know how to plan, is another thing he says, which, again, just feels so relevant. It's a bit like, the bad people have been planning for decades to do these terrible things, and all the good people are like, well, we thought everything was fine, and we just wanted people to get along, and we weren't really prepared for... Well, a lot of people weren't really prepared for how awful things are, and the amount you have to push back against the badness. So, but it's interesting. It's an interesting view on him. And it felt a little bit bleaker than I feel like he gets later.
Yeah, I think...
But it was quite a bleak situation. And I think he always has that idea in mind that he is manipulating people, but kind of for their own good, or for the wider good of the city.
For the good of the city as a whole, rather than, And I think, in some respects...
Interesting.
I always thought he's a good leader for the city. Let's be honest, the city is a bit chaotic.
Yeah, it's a bit of thing.
But you do have, this person at the top who is, I don't know, it's sort of incorruptible.
I think it's been described as benevolent dictatorship, which sounds awkward, but I think the point is practice is a bit like, well, what would a benevolent dictator actually look like? He'd probably do a lot of quite awful and manipulative things, but not to line his own purse or to get a load of power for himself, but just to keep the civic machine going and improving. And then throughout all the Ankh-Morpork focus books, that's kind of what we see.
Yeah, I mean, he does do some, and he certainly threatens to do something quite terrible things later on.
And he clearly has done some horrible stuff to people. And
don't be a mime in Ankh-Morpork.
What happened there? I feel like we don't have that backstory.
We don't know, but he does not like mimes.
Is the Assassin's Guild and the Fool's Guild being near each other part of this? I feel like there's probably fic about this somewhere. But
anyway, so yes, he does do terrible things, but kind of on a micro scale. It's only targeted. It's one or two people, perhaps.
Yeah, so
he's not doing it to a whole swathes of...
It's not a reign of terror, which is clearly what the dragon is doing. Sort of the keyhole surgery of terror.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of an analogy. I think that was reasonably good, actually. Keyhole surgery of terror,
but I mean, if you look at, literally later on, but he's quite mean, I say mean, to Moist van Lipwig to get him to do the poster.
But he's not mean. He's just saying, these are the options you have, and this is what I'll do. Yes. It's not a threat, this is what will happen.
It is
He gives him a choice.
Yes, he gives a choice. But he's quite...
Which don't feel like Vimes gets. Vimes is being moulded this whole time, which is mentioned later again. But yeah, I mean, at this point, it's before the moulding starts. I feel like this might be where Vetinari starts to see Vimes as a useful asset, whereas before, I think the Watch were largely just, unconsidered. And I think based on stuff he says in this book, which surprised me a little bit. I feel like, this is perhaps where he starts to pick
I think through resource. All this, because obviously the Watch, in its ineptitude, manages to save the day. Yeah. Kind of.
Well, yeah, we'll do that in a moment. But yes, that's why I kind of want to mention the patrician at this point. And it's just interesting because everyone in the city is absolutely terrified, rightly so. And the only person who seems calm is Vetinari, who's, sitting there in his dungeon. His palace has been destroyed above, but he's calm. He knows what's going on. He's kept up to date. He's being fed by rat servants. It doesn't sound the worst, but yeah. So shall we go on to the saving of the day? The dragon, it's flying about. And again, one of the things that Vimes and Sybil notice a lot is that the dragon doesn't make any sense. Something that big shouldn't be able to fly.
Yes.
How can it make fire without burning itself? The whole point is dragons are legendary and they don't make any sense, as opposed to the little guy swamp dragons. They have all these conversations and, and actually Vimes gets, Colon Nobby to do a bit of an actual investigation, asking about things and trying to find stuff out. And then the Summoning of the Dragon books comes up and it's clearly this hasn't just randomly happened, somebody is behind this. using sort of storybook logic again, like, I think it's Carrot talks about how old dragons have a vulnerable spot.
Vulnerable spot, yes.
A vulnerable scale.
Yeah.
But it might be tiny on something that, again, is as big as a plaza. And if you shoot it there, and it's mentioned earlier, but Sergeant Colon's a very good shot, and he has a lucky arrow. And so they're like, right, well, if we stand on the rooftops, we can shoot down. Because the whole thing is that Lady Sybil ends up being taken away by the palace guard because she's the first sacrifice. Because she's the wealthiest woman in the city, so she's very impeccable breeding, and also unmarried, which they've decided probably close enough to virgin. Yeah. So she's kind of being a sacrifice. Again, at one point it's pointed out that, Sybil is like, one of the most aristocratic people and they're the rank. But they all quite like her. Even Nobby is not stealing her spoons.
No, exactly.
And so, and she just sees everyone as like a jolly good chap. So, it's kind of nice while the class consciousness is still present.
Yeah.
But yes, so they're like, oh, we'll do this. And then they suddenly get into, it's a 1 in a million chance, but just might work. And it's like, wait, is this a 1 in a million chance, though? And they're like, maybe it's only 1 in 1,000, and those never work. So then the watchmen are on the roof, kind of trying to think, well, how do we make this more unlikely so the odds are better in our favour? So they have Colon. What is it? He's got one boot. He's standing on one leg. He's got one boot on. He's got he's got a boot in a chamber pot. He's got something on his head. He's knocking the arrow, and then
it's just a ridiculous in trying to kind of engineer this kind of idea of a 1 in a million. They're just making him do slightly just ridiculous things, which doesn't really make it a 1 in a million chance. It makes it just ridiculous. But
I mean, it's quite a good joke,
Because obviously we're dealing with the Discworld, which is magical, where 1 in a million chances
happen all the time.
So they're at least cognitive enough of the
cognizant.
That's the one.
Yeah, they're cognizant of the narrative rules of the universe.
To try and engineer it, but unfortunately doesn't quite work for them. The dragon sees them. The shot goes wild, and the dragon proceeds to vaporize the building they're standing on, which just happened to be a whiskey distillery, which promptly explodes. And do you know what the odds of 3 watchmen surviving a exploding whiskey distillery that's just been torched by a dragon are? You're right, they're 1,000,000 to 1.
Yes, there's a pool, a very deep pool just outside where they do some sort of distillery business.
It's some sort of catch pool for the it's water runoff, whatever. It's
stuff,
there.
What was distilled out. Yes, they all land in this pool, which means they aren't vaporized. Although they're all a bit worried about each other at one point or another.
Oh, it's the old classic of where's Bob? Where's Bob? But Bob's Bob. What? Oh, what are you doing? What are you mourning? Kind of as Bob comes over from the other side. It's one of those.
And Vimes rushes off to save Sybil, and then it all kind of ends up. That's Errol.
We mentioned Errol briefly at the start, and
foreshadowing.
Yes, Errol is the swamp dragon, and
he's Errol he's like the knobby knobs of swamp dragons.
Yes, he spends most of the book eating everything. I mean, we mentioned it previously. This is why Vimes wasn't able to drink any of his booze that was in the bottom of the drawer.
I think once he ate it, because he didn't just drink it, he ate the bottles.
Lamp oil, everything.
Kerosene, which I guess is that. The kettle, he ate the kettle.
He ate the kettle. Basically, the idea is these swamp dragons can adjust their digestive systems to act as, basically to just basically do chemistry. They're just small balls of chemistry.
Sure, yeah, okay.
So
I don't have Saturn's background, I'll go with that.
So Errol throughout the book has just been eating and gurgling.
And then he starts going white and he seems a bit ill.
Yes.
And because then he gets very, very cold because he ends up being taken to Lady Sybil's and put in a separate stable because he's gone weirdly cold and he's gone white and his steam's coming off.
But it's particularly he starts doing this after he's confronted the dragon for once.
Oh yes, because he sees the dragon, he starts trying to confront it, and then the dragon disappears.
And Sybil's kind of going, well, basically he's trying to.
The males are trying to fight each other.
Trying to build up his flame so he can be as trying to fight the dragon, and the final showdown.
Bear in mind that Errol can sit on your shoulder, and the other dragon, as mentioned, size of a plaza.
Yeah, and Errol can't fly. He's got his.
Well, they've got stubby little wings.
Vestigial wings. He can't. The other swamp dragons can fly. He can't.
I thought they could flutter a bit. I thought they were kind of like chickens.
But he's got even less wings than the others, so flying is not an option for him.
The picture I've drawn is when he's in his normal state before this whole thing happens.
So yes, the final showdown is happening. It's Vimes and Sybil.
Versus a dragon.
Versus a dragon.
I had quite a clear picture of that scene.
And then you just kind of hear this noise coming from a distance as Errol comes rocketing, quite literally, to the rescue.
Turns out he was cooking up jet fuel in there.
Yes. and so yes, he starts basically being a small rocket-propelled dragon.
And he's flying all around the big dragon, kind of they think it's taunting it and teasing it, and then he flies off and dragon chases it. And then Sybil's looking and she goes, oh, because that thing has happened again. It turns out the big dragon, who was most referred to as the dragon or the king, it's female. so that thing's happened again. Because everyone's just the dragon. I suppose no one's quite bothered about this gender at the point it's incinerating them. So it turns out what Errol was doing wasn't like a male fighting display. It was in fact some sort of mating dance or flight. And Errol basically just distracts the dragon enough to fly away.
Yes.
But what that still leaves is Vimes where that a crime has happened. This is where I think Vimes starts focusing on crime. Somebody summoned this. This was a thing that happened. There was a plan. And
the dragon doesn't fly. They arrest the dragon.
Do they? Okay.
Yes. So there's a bit, and so they crash into each other. So Errol basically collides with the dragon. You get a massive collision. They land. The dragon's in a mess.
Is this before they realise it's female?
Yeah, okay. And then yes, because Lady Sybil's going, you've got to stop them because they'll kill, because they fight to the death. Vimes, Carrot goes and arrests the dragon.
Because he's already arrested, yeah.
Yeah.
Carrot tries to arrest almost everyone because very few people out Morport aren't breaking some sort of law that existed in the last several hundred years. It's not taken to the cells while given a trial, is it? It flies off. That's the end.
But they're kind of, and with Sybil, I keep trying to call her Ramkin.
In fairness, that is how she's referred to in a lot of the book.
But
I think she's called Sybil more later.
Yeah, basically standing there going, look at the brave watch who has helped.
She kind of perks them up quite a bit.
And this big crowd that is obviously now out for the dragon's blood. Because that's it. The mob wants to kill it, which it kind of seems reasonable. It's very dangerous. Yes.
And Sybil's there, Sybil, who has been a dragon enthusiast her entire life. Terrifying though is, never seen that scared of the dragon, just more interested in it and perplexed by it. It's oh no, we can't kill it. And then she says all the watch are the ones that saved us, but the upshot is the dragon ends up flying away.
Yeah, basically at that point.
Where would you hold it?
Basically, Errol returns, showing off, and then at this point, Sybil realises that it's not acting like it's a fight, and it's okay, and yes, they go flying off.
But the point is that the dragon being there is clearly a crime, a scheme, and Vimes I think thinks back over stuff he's heard before, and he goes to the palace and finds the patrician's secretary, who was then the king's secretary, and was having a horrible time of it and gone a little bit mad because the dragon kept talking in his head.
Yes. Which
is sort of a clue, because who summoned the dragon in his head originally? Oh, look, it's the Supreme Grand Master. So Veterinary's secretary is the one who's done all this. And what tipped Vimes off is that when Vimes, because Vimes at various points reports to the palace, mentions about, the secret society headquarters being torched, once goes, did they get out? When he would have no reason to think anyone was there when the dragon did it.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, Vimes doesn't notice at the time, but then later, and once says he can't do it, and they confront him in what's basically the wreckage of the palace. So the central hall is this giant cavern. They're kind of an office that's on the higher floor, which has had its wall fallen out. So it's just, they're basically on a precipice over this massive cavernous space. And Vimes says to Carrot, you can arrest this guy, charge him. And because Carrot has this habit of reading out all the laws, including all the, Section 4, I, paragraph C.
You have to know exactly what you're charging them with. Yeah.
That's the whole joke with Carrot doing it. And then what Vimes does, because throughout the book, there's been a lot of references. There's a couple of Sherlock Holmes references. There's a reference to Dirty Harry. There's probably various other police references and detective references I haven't fully got. There is a Beowulf reference, which I wasn't expecting. So Vimes does this thing, he turns around and he says to Carrot, it's like, throw the book at him. And it's only just after he turns around, he remembers that Carrot is very literal and also carries the Book of Laws with him at all time. And is also a very powerful young man. The Supreme Grand Master's standing on the edge of this precipice, and he tumbles to his death. But it's sort of not quite anyone's fault. Vimes was being figurative, and Carrot was being literal, and So that's, I guess, the end of that guy.
Yeah, and Veterinary's there, and he's kind of disappointed that he could have used him. He was a useful person.
Yeah, he saw him as an asset. Didn't he? Even though he tried to depose him.
But it's like, okay, well, we'll just let this one go. But the Watch have come out of this as heroes.
Yeah, they've got a new headquarters because their other headquarters was burned down. Lady Sybil just gives them one of the many properties her family owns.
Oh, I think it used to be the old police yard.
No, it's just a house her family owns in Doppler Slowers. And then they turn it into the Watch house, don't they?
Sure it was. I'm sure it was previously.
Why would Lady Sybil's family have owned the Watch house? I think it's just a house they have. Because in the other books, Doppler Slowers is like the original, and then they open other old watch houses, but it doesn't say that one was one. I think there's just other places that were watch houses that got put to other use until the Watch expands. Although I think Vimes then protests, and she's a bit like, well, we're not using it.
Okay, so it's just referred to as new premises instead of this round.
Yeah.
Well, the Watch are now heroes. Lady Sybil
They've been risen up.
Lady Sybil, was kind of yay,
It's interesting that everyone takes Lady Sybil's praise of them so to heart when everyone had kind of been like, she can be the first sacrifice. She's a bit of a strange lady, isn't she? And expendable.
I don't think the commoners kind of volunteered. I think it was.
No, it was other people.
It was They didn't disagree with it. They didn't step in and go, "What are we doing?" She's.
I mean, even Nobby and Colon kind of thought of her as like she's that slightly weird rich lady. But of course, when you're rich enough, it's eccentric, which I think is in a different book.
Yeah, at the mob, she was going, "Yay, the Watch!" And then Veterinary realizes that someone's got to get hailed as heroes. They it's a civic requirement. So the Watch are given an opportunity to say what they want.
Oh yeah, it's a little bit. Yes, he asks what they want as rewards, and it's all like the most piddly little stuff.
Because they don't they
never expected to be rewarded for anything. Oh, yeah. That's it. It's like rather than $30 a month, could we have 35? And Veterinary's looking at them like, and it's just he's used to dealing with civic leaders and guild heads and aristocrats and the wizards. Who I can't remember how they wriggle out of this, but I think the Arch-Chancellor, whoever it is, just fudges something, and they're like, nothing to do with us. Yeah, and he's just not used to the very humble requests of low-achieving individuals.
Yes, so the wages, they get $30 a month is not right. Basic rate of $35 a month with increments per rank.
Yeah, they're like, this is the other thing, they're like afraid to be asked now. You said, what do you want? They're almost afraid to ask for anything.
A new kettle that Errol made.
Because the Dragonator, yeah.
And a little bit of a day off.
And that's it.
Oh, and a dartboard.
Yes. Sorry, they put a snooker table in the sort of community area in my work, and that does feel slightly simple. Yes, it's this idea that Veterinary is always waiting for what is it you actually want? It's like, no, just... And this is the thing. In a lot of workplace stuff, how do we reward people? How do we, increase staff morale? It's like pay rises and more time off, and maybe a slightly pleasant working environment. Is we could do a scheme or this or that. It's like just give people a bit more money and more time at home. That's what people want.
It's pretty simple.
It's quite often on Ask a Manager. It's like, what kind of staff perks can we provide? And she's like, people want money and they want days off.
Keep it simple, that's all it is. So, but anyway, so end of it, and obviously at the end, we see Sybil and Vimes attempt to date.
Oh yeah, that's very sweet.
which is will be built on later. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, again, I think Pratchett writes a lot of the kind of relationships and romances in his book tend to be kind of around the edge of things.
Yeah.
Which is fine. And I think that's, there's usually a subtlety to it. I mean, it's clear at one point Sybil thinks Vimes is at the door and she's suddenly kind of like trying to like do herself up a bit, which she hadn't been doing before any of the times they met. And Vimes initially, I think, slightly terrified of Sybil, but
I think that's fair. I think that's a reasonably sensible attitude to be having.
But yeah, so they're all a bit sort of shy and bashful around each other to an extent. But then when they're talking, I guess, each of their own business, it's like that's what they focus on. But yeah, it's quite nice.
Yeah, it is nice. So anyway, we shall wrap this up because we've waffled for a bit. Mm-hmm. I think we both enjoyed the book.
Yep.
It's a great. I think it's a good story. We have definite beginning, middle, and end.
That's true. In the end, it seems like it actually is.
It's actually a good ending.
Yeah. It's not that the endings of previous books weren't good, but some of them sort of seemed a bit kind of hand-wavy.
Yes.
At times. I mean, I suppose in some respects this is kind of like a mystery, though not a traditional murder mystery exactly, but that has a sort of structure. We
do get you. Everything gets wrapped up well. Nothing, who the greatest Green Brand Master is makes sense. And I mean, let's be honest. We can work it out through the book. The thing with the dragon is resolved in again with something that was being built up throughout the entire book. The heroes get their rewards, and this, it goes on to build up, as I say, another pillar of. The Watch books are much beloved by people. Yes,
I mean, I do find the Witch and the Watch books are two of my favourite sub-series. I think this one, just because I read later ones first, I think the initial impression, but I quite like it now. And knowing where it's going, it's a good start, I think.
Yeah. So if you're wanting to get started with Discworld books, Guards, excellent place to start.
Thank you for listening.
And we will see you next time for Eric. Thank you for listening to Dining Table Discworld. You can find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Dining Table Discworld. You can also find us on BlueSky at dtdiscworld. All our other contact information and credits for our music can be found in our show notes. Thank you for listening again, and we'll see you in our next episode.